Nick, thank you so much. Welcome to the show. I'm so excited to chat to you today.
Thanks for having me.
And I'm going to let you just kind of describe where you're at the moment in Vancouver, especially because I'm super inspired by the work that you guys do in Samurai Brotherhood. And we were just chatting before we pressed record on how, my surprise when I came to Vancouver, and I was like super inspired by all these men that were just like doing this men's group all the time. And I got curious around what this men's group was, and was kind of, as a woman, like taken back as to like these men that were just dedicated and committed, and so committed to going to this men's group. So do you want to talk a little bit about what that even is and what that means and your involvement in it?
Yeah, absolutely. The Samurai Brotherhood is a member-funded nonprofit. And the men that you've met from that community are very committed and engaged. Part of that is because they like the work, but we also hold our members to a high standard. So in a lot of ways, we have an unusually high level of integrity compared to a lot of organizations in the world. And the reason we do that is that the nature of the work is important. Guys are bringing themselves to the meetings. They're talking about their lives. Sometimes they share very personal aspects of themselves. And when men are missing, they're not present, it takes energy away from the group. And what we're also combating is this, as my mentor would describe it, 21st century distracted man syndrome, where there are so many things happening and our focus is dissipated over different kinds of media, of social events, aspects of our own lives, our work, and people are not really honed into the things that are deeply, deeply important to them. We tend to be spread out fractally over a series of different topics. So that's where we get powers when we're committed to something in our life and we're deeply present. We tend to get more results that way as well when we're invested and we're engaged.
Interesting. And what was your inspiration of like kind of finding that and going into that?
Yeah, well, I bought a book back in 2012. It was written by my mentor, and I hadn't met him. I was at Banyan Books in Kitsilano.
Oh, the best bookshop ever. You can spend hours in there, right?
Fantastic spot.
Yeah.
And like most people who buy books, I didn't read it.
Mm-hmm.
I put it on the shelf. I think I read the first couple pages. And the book was called Rude Awakening. It's Pitfalls in the Spiritual Path. And it was really a handbook, a guide, a very practical instruction on some of the errors people make or some of the ways we go astray when we start seeking wisdom or knowledge about ourselves, about the experience in this planet, and the ways in which our ego can kind of take that and, put us maybe above other people. And then the way that plays out with friends and family and so on. So fantastic book. And at the time I was playing professional poker for a living. And I thought that if I read the book, it would dramatically shift my experience and maybe I would quit poker or I would come to some grand awakening. And it's like I wasn't ready for that. I was resistant to it. 5-6 months later, I walked back into Banyan one rainy, stormy night, and there he was giving a public talk. I saw the book propped up on the counter, and it was just like something hit me. I was like, whoa. I just kind of felt like I was supposed to be there. Mm-hmm. One thing led to another. I started taking co-ed trainings with him. He was leading groups in Vancouver, weekly groups, usually even the 12 to 16 people kind of size. And he was running a series of conversations there focused on Jungian shadow work and other aspects of personal transformation. Totally changed my life. And later had an opportunity to be one of the first, we call it the original 6 members of the Samurai Brotherhood, which he booted up and started in his apartment in Kitsilano. And that's come a long way. We've got almost 250 members now in North America. And we don't do any paid advertising. It's all been word of mouth.
Wow. So I'm curious about what your experience was leading into like when there's just like 6 of you in this space and it was new. Were you like terrified, like as a man, like not knowing what's kind of going to show up? Like, were you scared, or what was like showing up for you leading into that?
Well, I wouldn't say that I was terrified because I had a relationship with Phil, mm-hmm. and I knew him and I trusted him. Mm-hmm. Also, the other men that came into the circle, one of them was my brother. Another one was one of my very good friends. So I had a bit of rapport and safety in that way. But that particular topic of being scared or afraid, or the resistance to joining a conversation like that is not uncommon. We get feedback like that all the time from guys when they're looking at just signing up and joining. They acknowledge, I'm kind of hesitant, I'm not really sure what this is about and what's going to happen. For me, I was a little bit lucky that I already had rapport, so it wasn't as scary of a thing. That said, I didn't know what I was going to get out of joining a men's group. Like, I really had no idea. When it was offered to me, I accepted the invitation because I was in a tough spot in my life. I was in a big transition. In many ways, it felt like one of those, a couple months prior to joining the men's group, it felt like sort of a rock bottom time in my life. So for me, it was very appropriate for me to be there and join, and I got a lot out of it. And there's a long list of things that I got, but I had no idea that I was going to get those. The most important thing to note, I think, is that I trusted a man who recommended it to me, who invited me in, and I was open. I was open-minded. I was willing to engage in a conversation.
So what kind of things do you see even now, like leading this, is like, what kind of things does a guy go through of wanting to join? Like, what do you see them feeling before they're coming, and, the thought process of like, oh, I would like to get more, I'd like to have more of this in my life, so I want to seek out men's work. Do you know what I'm saying?
Can you ask that another way? I think what you're saying is like, what is the process from a man having some curiosity about the community, right, and then actually going to join?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, well, men come to the community in different ways. Some people come across our website on Facebook or Instagram, and they get drawn into some of the conversation, and they end up applying on samuraibrotherhood.com. Sometimes they have no affiliation with the community, they have no relationship to it, and they don't know any of the members. Some guys come in through podcasts because members of our community either run their own or are featured, like, here I am on your podcast, or they have a personal connection to someone in the community. So those are the ways that people come in. And then the process is essentially they apply, they fill out a formal application form, they speak with myself, and I will, if we have room available, I will assign them to a specific group. Those captains, those group leaders will connect with the guy and make sure that it's a good fit, that he understands all the guidelines, code of conduct. And then from there, he has an opportunity to join a squad.
Mm-hmm. Now, why? Like, what's the benefit then? Let's talk about the juice. So a man comes into men's group, and why would they do something like that? Like, what are they going to get out of that?
Yeah. So why would a man actually join a men's group and take time out of his week to
right,
be there? Yeah. Well, it's 3 hours a week, and it's a solid commitment. You got to take yourself to the room. You got to be there as part of the conversation. You got to be awake and sober. There's no snacks or TV to distract you. It's a very focused, formal meeting. And the reasons that men initially might come to the group is that they want to expand their network. They want to improve the quality of their social circle. There's some aspect of their experience on this planet that they are frustrated with, or that they want to improve. That could be personal relationships. It could be health. It could be family stuff. Ultimately, what everyone is seeking, not just the guys in this community, but men and women, is connection with themselves, connection with other people. And some of us crave deeper connection, more authentic connection. Maybe it's not just playing volleyball at the beach or going to see a movie with a few friends, but they want to talk about life. They want to speak about their emotional experience. And what guys get from the Brotherhood is usually far beyond what they come seeking, because there are a number of other benefits that come from being engaged in the conversation. Some things we can't reveal on
I was going to say, is there like a
podcast.
men's code where you're like, that's as far as I can say?
Yeah. Some things are left for members only.
Ooh, nice. Yeah. Okay. And so like masculine is obviously a word that I'm playing around with a lot in this podcast season. Do you talk about masculinity in men's group, masculine essence, and what does that kind of mean to you and to you, the men that you work with? I know that's a big question.
No, it's a good one. So what you're asking there is, do we speak about masculinity in group?
Mm-hmm.
And, what does that conversation look like? Is that,
Yeah.
yeah. So the conversation around masculinity is very topical and timely in terms of Me Too movement, a lot of things that are happening with feminism and the conversations that are happening around equality. And for the guys in our group, we don't have or as an organization, we don't have a firm stance to tell guys what masculinity is necessarily, but they tend to get that from each other almost through osmosis. When you sit with other men and there's a collective energy, and when people are called to a higher standard and you see men thriving and feeling good about themselves, there is a natural sort of passing of wisdom in that way. The masculine conversation that we have in group is, what does it mean to you to be a man? Every man is going to have some different type of language or sense of what it is to be themselves, to be a man in modern society. And there's a long list of things that you might use to describe that. One of the most important pieces is that it is the man himself, coming to his own realizations about that versus me or some other guy telling him. Mm. What we're up against is the pop culture portrayal of masculinity being that you've got a Ferrari and a Victoria's Secret model girlfriend and a six-pack, and you have open bundles of cash on your kitchen counter, and maybe you've got a big, strong dog that will fight intruders. There are some ideals that we look at Instagram or social media accounts that maybe they're titled modern masculinity or masculine ideal, or, they're using the word masculine and they're tying it with very superficial representations of what it means to be a man. Mm. Now, if you ask the guys in our community, would they like money? Would they like a beautiful partner? Would they like some nice assets, a couple homes? Would they like to travel the world? Yeah, absolutely. But we're not limited to those things. Mm-hmm. And not everyone aspires to those more superficial ideals. The code that we have, that our founder wrote, the 14-point code, we call it the Code of the Conscious Warrior, outlines in detail some of the higher principles of what it means to be a man. And I think if women read it, there's some things in there that they resonate with as well, about being true to yourself and speaking your speaking your truth to other people and communicating with authenticity and power, and being a person of your word so that people can rely on you and you can be trusted. And all of those points are really a guide for life. So it's not like they're commandments that we force people to adhere to those. And even the most successful leaders in our community from time to time fall short on some of these principles. So we're always striving, we're always aspiring to these higher ideals, and the pursuit of that is sort of the most meaningful and worthwhile thing.
Mm-hmm. And how does this help you in, really stepping into like being a better man, or being the man that you want to be, or having that leadership, like as you go through life? Like, how does this work as coming together and like really help cement that in?
The community is really helpful for a number of reasons. For me as a leader, because it's deeply important to me, and I believe that this is part of my purpose to facilitate groups, to support men in this experience and bring the work to other guys, it is one of the most useful things that I can do with my time on this planet. And that's my personal feeling. So when you're oriented in a task, in a mission that you deeply, deeply care about, in itself, it is fulfilling. Mm. And what we would love all the men in our community to have, and all of the men that are going to come into our community over the coming years, is to develop that for themselves. Not to say that they need to lead a samurai group or that men's work is their true calling, but that they seek that out for themselves, that they find their holy grail, so to speak. Mm-hmm. And that is one of the codes that we have for our community. So being a leader gives me a sense of responsibility, a sense of purpose. Being in the group, in a circle of men, also does a number of things. And one of those that's unavoidable is when you come into a group and you sit down with, let's say, 10, 12 other guys, you are naturally comparing yourself to these men. And that is maybe the insecure part of yourself. That's the inquisitive part of yourself that is observing and being part of the experience. And when guys share with each other and talk with each other and give each other feedback, there's also direct challenge that you receive from other guys. So it is an incubator, so to speak, for like the human spirit or for that individual man. And he gets a lot of things through that experience. Many of them are subjective, and I'm trying to, paint this sort of with a wider brush as to what I see happen for guys and certainly what happened for myself.
Yeah, because I've had a lot of conversations with men and guys and guy friends as well, and sometimes what I see is this ability to keep everything within themselves, right? Like, it's not like they have mates and they have, like, guys that they go and do some fun things with, but they don't necessarily have conversations where they're sharing whatever they need to share or get out or have that type of conversation, right? And so often I find that like they can bottle stuff up and not know how to express it or where to go. So I like, it would be interesting if men coming together in that environment and then all of a sudden you have the men support around you. What was your experience in coming into that space from maybe before you had that book in awakening kind of experience to then having this safe kind of community of brothers where you actually were able to, I don't know if you express emotion or you share some hard things or whatever it is, like, how did that really shape you or change you?
So when you asked that question, I actually thought of a couple different things. And one of them is the way that boys are socialized and conditioned. And if you look at, generationally speaking, the way that some men are conditioned, we have like the Marlboro Man as a classic example of this stoic, sort of no feeling, hard and rugged, tough kind of guy. Nothing phases him. And he's got a nice tan and a cowboy hat. Well, there are lots of guys in the world that are like that. But really what I find is that people have a much richer, deeper emotional experience in their relationships, in their day-to-day life, in their families. And they're not so stoic. They feel things.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're combating is the lone wolf that is all men, which is that we are to go it on our own and we don't need support. And I'm going to struggle on my own. I'm going to suffer in silence. In the groups, you are encouraged and challenged to speak about what's happening for you and to expose your mind to the group. That is part of the culture. And that opportunity has many, many benefits. I mean, there is that sort of therapeutic side to it where you speak about what's happening for you and people hear you. And just even in that, it can be a bit of a relief. Like say you say something you never told anyone before. Oh, man, that feels kind of nice. But for me personally, when I joined the group early, it felt great to talk about my challenges with other guys who could offer some insight or remind me not to beat myself up so much. And I would get good feedback. I would get creative ideas, or I would get some motivation, but they would also hold me accountable. So if I was having a challenge with something, or I was worried about some aspect of my life, I could bring that to the group, and the feedback I would get is like, all right, what's one thing you can do this week to move your life forward? What's one thing you can do to improve your circumstances? And in that process is the sort of messaging, is the culture of calling men forward into their purpose, into the things that are really, really important for them. One other thing that definitely happened for me is that comparison to the other guys. You're looking around the room thinking, okay, where do I stand here? Am I stronger than that guy? Would I beat him in a fight? Am I better looking? Do I have more money? You know, am I the most successful guy here? There's all these things you naturally do. You compare yourselves to other people. And one thing that I saw clearly was, oh, these guys seem to be lifting weights. They seem to be, you know, in pretty good shape. And I was not lifting weights. I was not working out. So there's that insecure part of myself. It's like, oh, is my body look as good? There's all of these things taking place. The other side to that is maybe these men have something going for them that I don't. Maybe there's something that's actually really working, which is why they do it. And that's going to play out differently for everyone. It's just like a little bit of my process. And I can say that since joining the community, I'm definitely a lot healthier in terms of my diet, my activity, and that has largely been inspired by the great friends and the positive, healthy masculine role models that I have met and that I have dinner with, that I socialize with. And I like to consider myself one of those guys.
Surrounding influences is an important thing, isn't it? Like what's going on around you and why, like, you know, sometimes I think about that. Like if I'm not changing a behavior or if I'm doing something habitual that's not serving me, like what's actually showing up around me? Like where's my environment at? Like where am I taking in this information and why am I not changing? And I found that my acceleration of growth and change came from surrounding myself with people that called me forward and like will, you know, inspire me in those ways like what you're saying. So I feel like that is such an important element when it comes to actually stepping into something that you feel good in, like accelerating self-love or accelerating like the person you want to be or whatever. Surrounding influences is big, isn't it?
Yeah, it's massive. I think for me personally, all of the reasons that I am in the position that I am today are a result of the social circle, the friends that I have, the opportunities that I sought out, and the reciprocal nature of those relationships. For example, even one of the jobs that I have right now, I have because a man in one of my mastermind groups had a relationship with me for a couple of years. He knew me, he knew what I was up to and what I was interested in. And he mentioned my name to a thought leader in Vancouver. And then I got a job opportunity with that person. And that to me is just amazing, the power of relationships. And it really calls home this point that no one does it alone. You might see a particular personality or celebrity crushing it on Instagram or YouTube or with their 7-8-figure Amazon business. All of those people had people support, help, and mentor them along the way. Nobody goes it alone. And the guys in our community and men in the world or women in the world that are running their own mastermind groups and are getting these little collectives together really, really understand that. And if they don't at its inception, they come to realize like how important it is.
Yeah. What advice do you have for people that are like trying and forcing to that go it alone, lone wolf phase that they're in?
The advice I have for people that are going it alone and being the lone wolf is that there is another way. And there are a lot of people out there that are going through the same experience, the same struggles. And in collaborating and sharing and connecting with those other individuals, your life and your friendships and your business can be so much more productive. And the weight of that burden, of that pressure, some of that sort of emotional tension can really be lifted. So there's a lot of selfish reasons that you would go to a mastermind group that you might start one. And the question then becomes, what are you contributing and what can you bring? And that's one of the questions we ask of our members in the men's community.
I love that. And what advice or kind of thoughts do you have on people that might be even like listening, like a man that might even be listening to this podcast, because there's obviously some sort of interest, right, in wanting to improve or wanting to, you know, just curiosity even, but that step forward of actually going and, you know, and and inquiring about a men's group or going and spending more time in these conversations, there's like that kind of barrier. What kind of advice do you have for like moving through that barrier of fear?
Just one second. It's like a car alarm going off.
Oh.
Can you hear it on your end?
No.
Okay, perfect. So the advice I would have for men that are in a position of curiosity or at a distance from any sort of supportive community, and I would say that this is just general advice that would be applicable to men or women, which is that your experience that you're having is not going to change until you try something different and push yourself. And a lot of people find death to be a morbid reality. People avoid it. We don't want to talk about it. We want to get younger. We want to de-age. We want to put special creams on our face. We want to have medical modifications. We want to filter our photos on Instagram. We want to be forever young. And the truth is, the only certainty is that you are going to die. And as soon as you embrace that with power and acceptance, you have an opportunity to move forward with your life and put down all of the heavy loads that you've been carrying from disappointment and maybe emotional trauma or missed expectations or lost opportunities. You know, it doesn't matter how old you are, you can always begin, and you can begin again. And so when you're looking at changing the circumstances of your life, it takes a radical honesty with yourself to not lie to yourself about what's really happening. And the difficult part of that is you're up against a number of mechanisms that just want to keep you safe and playing small. So that would be the advice that I would have for anybody thinking about changing their circumstances or getting into a group or personal growth or seeing a therapist or working with a coach.
Yeah, I love that. And I love that you brought up death, because to me, death is like, has become a motivator for me. It's like when I'm in circumstances that remind me that like this life is pretty like a miracle and like it's a gift, and it's, am I living it to it? Like, am I living a 10 out of 10? I call it. Like if it's like turbulence on a plane, or like recently I was in some earthquakes in LA, like moments like that remind me of like, oh, like this is precious. Like, how am I living it? And am I showing up fully? And it kind of motivates me to do more. And I remember growing up, my mum used to have this like set of plates and like cups and things, but it was always for a special occasion. So they were like locked away in this like thing for a special occasion. And she's never ever, like I'm almost 28, in my 28 years, she's never ever used these plates and cups and things. And it's like, I reflect on this analogy because sometimes I feel like we're waiting for a moment to do something different. Like we're waiting for something, like that special moment to then bring out these good plates. But then what happens if that doesn't come? Like, it's like, what, like when, yeah, like we don't know. So I think it is a really strong point to bring home of like, utilize that as your motivator and not as that thing that you wait for, because we don't know when that is, right?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, death is certainly tragic, and my community has been rocked by the loss of several people that have died young. And it rippled out into the community and really shook people up. And I have seen a number of people take dramatic steps forward with their life because of the way that that hit them. It's sort of, you know, just like an awakening. There's such a raw, unavoidable truth to that circumstance. And you realize that you do not have an infinite number of days, and none of them are guaranteed to you. And a lot of this is, you know, currently on social media and YouTube, and there's all kinds of inspirational videos and talks that are really getting people to tap into this mentality and this perspective. And it is just a deep truth of this experience is there's nothing guaranteed to you. There are no promises.
Yeah, absolutely. I wholeheartedly agree with that. And yeah, wow. So I want to talk about I want to circle back to the masculinity question. So around that, what have you found is kind of like a concern or I feel like sometimes around that topic we're kind of tiptoeing, like everyone, like even I notice in this interview, like asking the question around that, I'm like, oh, like how do I because am I saying something wrong? Am I, there's like this kind of tiptoeing around. So what do you experience around that topic that you feel has really helped you kind of really helped you accept it or relieve you of something? Or does that make sense? Like it's like a controversial kind of tiptoeing topic right now. So what do you feel like you're sharing that's really helping men step into the masculinity that they know to be true for them?
Well, I think what you might be addressing there in terms of your emotional experience is the relationship with the unknown. For example, you don't know ultimately what a men's group is because
Mm-hmm.
it's for men.
Mm-hmm.
And you will never be allowed at one of our meetings.
Mm-hmm.
And that's okay. There is also a suspicion that people have, not just women, but men and women, that guys meeting in secret on their own, no women around, so not a public meeting, it's a members club only, that maybe we would be doing something nefarious, that maybe we would be bashing women or coming up with some evil plan. Because men in history have done that. They have met in secret and they have plotted terrorist acts and other despicable things. So there is just that sort of thing. It's like the unknown. What are these guys really doing? The website seems sort of esoteric. It's called the Samurai Brotherhood. What is that about? There's just a lot of variables that are unknown to people. And so when guys approach the community, or I mention the community to men, they come to an open house, they check out the website, there is a bit of a skepticism and there is a bit of a question as to what's really going on here and what is the agenda and what are we really talking about. There's a fear that maybe you're going to show up to a group or to an open house and there's going to be a bunch of guys wearing red MAGA hats holding tiki torches. And people imagine the worst. Mm. What they discover is that our community is filled with guys who deeply care about men's work and guys having a great experience on this planet and having their dreams fulfilled and being connected with other healthy masculine men. We really, that's what we're about. And sometimes that shows up, or it manifests in guys going for a hike together, going for a swim, going for a workout, having dinner together, throwing a party, going traveling. There's all kinds of things that guys do outside of group that build and forge those relationships. But you absolutely make a good point that it's sort of almost, I don't know if taboo is the right term, but is a lot of skepticism, fear, judgment around what a men's group is.
And so for women, what would you feel is, what would you feel needs to be said, even like for women that are kind of curious about like, okay, well, what, how can we not be like tiptoeing around this? Like, how can we not be like curious, but like, what is like, or scared or whatever about it? I personally am a big fan of it because I know so many men in it that I'm super inspired by. Like, it's like, holy crap, like I can really see a difference in someone that I knew and then someone that has now gone into men's work and is showing up differently for who he is, and he's connected to his purpose and he's going for it, so like I have, I guess, created a really good relationship and thing and dynamic with it because I see who somebody is from going through that experience. But if women are like, oh, my partner or this guy I'm seeing or whatever is interested in men's work, like what does that even mean? Or what does that do? Like, how can we be kind of okay with it?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a big conversation there. It's sort of multiple threads. Let me ask you this. You have a positive association with the men's group because you've met some of the guys in it, mm-hmm. and you trust them and respect them and you feel safe with them. You feel like they're men of a certain level of integrity. Mm-hmm. If your own man, your own partner, is assuming you're straight, your own partner's in a men's group, what are some of the fears that you might have about him being in there and you not knowing, what's going on?
I think it would be if he's not communicating to me what's going on, but that's a priority. Like, because I noticed there's a lot of like, this is a priority for a lot of men. There's commitment there. There's like, I'm going to choose this over my woman or my whatever because of that thing that's set up. To me, that's actually inspiring. But like, if I go into what maybe women might feel, it's like, okay, well, why is this so important? Like, why is this more important than I am? And what is going on that you don't want to communicate with me?
Yeah. So when a man sets time for something that is more important than his woman, all of a sudden it's like, whoa, hey, like, I'm not the most important thing in your life. And that judgment or that perception is not necessarily true. It's just that this is something that I'm marking down. It's a priority for myself, and it's deeply, deeply important to me. It doesn't mean that the woman is necessarily less than. It's just that it's a particular conversation and an activity that she cannot be a part of. And this is one of the great things about our group, is that we've created a space for men, a container for men to get together and have conversations. As soon as a woman enters the room, as soon as a woman joins the conversation, the tone can change.
Mm-hmm.
And my mentor would suggest that if 12 women are in a room and a guy walks in, that they might not alter their conversation very much. It would have to be a very good-looking man of status to really disrupt or interrupt that conversation. And for men, we don't have a lot of spaces where we go and meet together to have a focused conversation other than business. We tend to meet around things like a game. We go to a football game, we go play poker, we meet over lunch to discuss business plans. We go out to meet women or, find dating prospects. Maybe we go watch a fight, watch a boxing match. So those are the things that guys typically get together for. So we're getting together without those pieces. There's no food, there's no TV. It's a focused conversation about masculinity, about life as a man in the modern world. And that's just very different. So people are wondering what is happening here? It's new for a lot of people. And women who are worried about what your man is doing in men's group and why he doesn't tell you all the gory details of the group, well, that's part of our code of conduct. We have a confidentiality agreement. What happens in group stays in group. But if you look at our code, you look at the guiding principles of our organization, I would be surprised to find any woman who did not want her man to be in the circle. And we also have gay, bisexual men in our community, and they also are getting a ton of benefits. So whether you're a hetero or homosexual, there are benefits to having your partner involved in healthy, conscious community and looking at aspects of themselves that maybe don't serve them, or being more focused on their dreams or their own sense of alignment and their purpose. Everybody wants a partner that's lit up and happy and fulfilled and doing the things that they want with their experience. So to me, it's a no-brainer that if your man comes home and tells you he joined a men's group, you'd be like, awesome.
Yeah. It's almost like, let's just give it a chance, like see how he shows up better in a couple of weeks. And you'll be like, okay, go to that men's group thing. Why are you missing it?
Yeah. And it's a great opportunity for women to have time to themselves,
for sure,
and to focus on themselves as well, or get together with their girlfriends. And I think that most households and families will benefit from this work.
Yeah. Now you like literally answered something that was coming up for me, which was around like, we're talking in a heterosexual like norm right now, but I was curious to bring in, like, do you have gay and bisexual and different men that come into that group? And is that beneficial? And you touched on that. So I'm so grateful that you did that, because I was in a conversation recently actually with a gay man around the feminine and masculine polarity within his relationship. And he's like, how I struggle to relate to people that are talking about this, because a lot of people aren't talking in that way. And, and it's making it, feel like this is, this masculine feminine thing. It becomes a bit triggering. So like, that's really good that you mentioned that. And do you have anything that you could share on that experience?
So our organization is not focused on the sexual orientation of an individual, their religious beliefs, or political affiliation. Those things are not criteria for joining a men's group. If you identify as a man, then we've got a spot for you, provided that you're willing to follow the code of conduct and meet the guidelines. So we're pretty open with respect to that conversation. And just like any organization in the world that has a couple hundred members or 1,000 or 10,000, there are going to be people of different sexual orientations, races, and religious beliefs that comprise those groups. So we're not blind to that. We're not ignorant to that. I do get questions from men, emails from men saying, hey, I'm a gay man. On your website, it doesn't say anything about that. Is there a spot for me? And obviously we let them know, of course there is, that your sexual orientation is not a factor in terms of joining. So the whether you're straight, gay, whatever your orientation is, you would get benefits and will get benefits from the community, and there's guys there that can relate to you. We now actually have a group within our organization that is for specifically gay and bisexual men, which is a supplementary group. It's not a substitute for a men's group. So you have to be part of a regular men's circle, and then as a member, you get an opportunity to join another division, so to speak, that has regular meetings.
I love that so much. Amazing. Okay, well, this was a fun conversation around men's. I didn't even know we were going to go into all of the men's work, like codes and things like this. So this was really valuable, I think, because like I've mentioned numerous times, I really see value in this work for men, and I know that men are curious and are wondering where this is, and especially like I was saying, this I find is leading like in the Northern Hemisphere and in Vancouver and Canada and stuff. I see this a lot, and I think it's definitely up and coming so much more in places like where I'm from, Australia. But yeah, I think it's super valuable. And for me, as a woman doing women's work as well, the benefits of doing that is like next to none. Like it's so valuable. So I think there's value in both. And then I think it's beautiful that we can also come together as men and women and, and rise together instead of it being this kind of like this apart thing of like, whatever. So I'm passionate about all of them.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think the relationship between men and women can be transformed in many ways, but it's also akin to the relationship of, if you look at a heteronormative relationship, the man nourishing himself, getting the things he needs, and the woman doing the same, and then they can come together to have a great relationship. When people are floundering, struggling, they're really, really in pain, it becomes difficult for them to be in a great relationship.
Yeah, absolutely. And to wrap it up, is there anything you feel you would like to share on to the men that are listening right now around men's work, men's group, being curious about it?
Sure. One thing I would just highlight for the listeners is in public school, a large percentage of the teachers are female. I would argue, based on some of the stats that I've read, that that's close to 80%. It might even be as high as 85%, but let's say 80, even 75. And the Industrial Revolution, what we had was men going off to work and women staying home, playing the traditional homemaker role. And the young boys would go to school and they would have predominantly female teachers. So what happens to a young boy, a young man, when he spends his time being raised by his mother, father's off to work, and he goes to school and he's taught mainly by women? He doesn't get a lot of time around healthy masculine role models. Men and women have as much to learn from each other. It's not that one is better than the other, but when there's a lack thereof, just like when a man doesn't have any exposure to women, or when he grows up and becomes an adult and he has no experience dating, he has no sexual history, it becomes an area that is very, very unexplored. He has no real knowledge or wisdom in those areas of what it means to be with a woman or how he maybe should carry himself. And so what we find is, as men start exploring this for themselves, they see, oh, my father was at work a lot, and maybe there were some things that I didn't get from him. And maybe it's because my dad never met his father. Maybe he didn't have a role model himself. Some men never met their dad. Some men lost their father at a young age, or he left the family. So there's a number of things that guys are doing healing on, not just with the father, but with also men in their lives from school, the way that they were related to or bullied. And that is part of the, I would say, evolution of one's own psyche, as you learn how to relate to people in a more empowered way versus teasing and bullying and those things that we learn as a teenager to assert ourselves or identify ourselves or gain power in a group. And that is just one aspect of the culture of this work that I'd like to highlight. And it's one of the reasons that many guys are finding a lot of growth in this conversation and in this community, and why we are growing at such a strong pace. And we're getting emails from people around the world, and people like yourself are reaching out to have conversations. It means a lot to me, and it means a lot to the leaders in our organization. And it's an honor to talk about it. So thanks for having me.
No, thank you so much. And thank you for sharing all that you can, and for doing this work. It's so appreciated from even my perspective, but also, like, I know what it's doing to these conversations and men and women and all of us that are coming together. And yeah, deeply appreciate the work that you're doing. So thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining the show. Where can people go to find out more about the work and about you as well?
Yeah, absolutely. SamuraiBrotherhood.com is a great place to go. On Instagram, at Samurai Brotherhood. If you're looking to connect with me, you want more information on what I'm up to, nicksaulconsulting.com or at nicksaulconsulting on Instagram.
Epic. Well, thank you so much, Nick. I've loved having this chat today. Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for having me. It's great to meet you.